What's going on, everybody? Welcome into The Highlight, a business podcast for only the most serious business people in the world. And today, obviously, so serious right now. I've got the most serious person I've ever met in my entire life. We haven't laughed at all. We're not smiling at all. He's not smiling right now. We're sharing The Highlight today with Walker Deibel. And Walker's one of the most interesting men on the planet. And I told him we had to get his accomplishments down to 2 here for the audience. And what they are is he wrote a great book for any entrepreneur, any small business owner out there called Buy Then Build. And he's also the founder of the Acquisition Lab. Walker, welcome to the show, man. It's good to have you.
Chandler, thanks so much for having me. I'm super excited to get down and serious with you.
Yeah. Well, so the backstory of that is my business partner is he's the fun one of our partnership. And early on in the days of starting our company, High Beam Marketing, I was so intense all the time. I was just like, we got to go, we got to grind. And he was like, bro, if we don't have some fun, like I quit. And I was like, all right, fair enough. So we start the episodes that way just as a good reminder, mostly for me, to make sure that I'm not going off the deep end with serious, stupid crap that doesn't actually matter at the end of the day. Well, man, thanks for jumping on here. I know you're a busy guy, but I appreciate it. I'd love if you just start us off here with a little bit about who you are and a little bit of your background.
Sure. Where to start?
It's hard to start because you are the most interesting man on the planet. So good luck. This is a hard question.
Let me throw it at you like this. My life is really 3 legs of the same stool. Okay, that's where I spend my career. The one leg is sort of like the businesses that I've acquired. I started buying companies. I started looking for a company to buy back in 2004. Okay, and then the second, and let's see, businesses that I've acquired. I think I only have 2 right now. And then the second leg is everything sort of like buy then build and acquisition lab related, meaning sort of like the buy side or helping entrepreneurs understand there's a better way, okay, and helping first time buyers do that. And then the third leg is I partnered with Quiet Light Brokerage where I help online based entrepreneurs exit their business, right? So it's buying, it's selling, and it's kind of like operating the businesses that I have.
Yeah, I love the sport of business. Like I think business is a game, and I am beyond excited for this interview because we were talking about it a little bit. I've made so many mistakes, so I have questions, and it's mostly going to be self-serving for me. Good. This interview is not for anybody else; it's just for me. But I'd love to start with you talk about acquisition entrepreneurship all the time. Would you mind defining that for us and sort of explaining a little bit about where it came from and what it is?
Sure. So acquisition entrepreneurship is just sort of pushing the boundary of what entrepreneurship means, right? So in other words, we think about like real estate entrepreneurs, we think about, tech entrepreneurs, we think about, even like gig economy entrepreneur, there's these sort of like adjectives that started to slowly come in front
Side
of the
hustles,
word.
Yeah,
Right.
Yeah.
And the thing is that like, I think that at the end of the day, I'm just a really bad startup guy, right? Like every time that I tried to start a business, it failed. And we went to, look, the book opens with, the last real startup that I did, well, I guess other than the Acquisition Lab, but, we were oversubscribed. We were in a top 10 accelerator. We had recruited an executive from Microsoft to be our CEO, and completely ran out of money, right? Just yet again, like I couldn't get it to work. And
what's funny about that story in the book, to cut you off here, was that you had a lot of entrepreneurs that I meet with that start up, they say, well, I don't have this and I don't have this and I'm being really scrappy. And I'm sure you guys were still scrappy, but you guys had a lot of cards in your hand that were positive cards, and it still didn't work out, which is crazy.
Well, and what I'm trying to explain here, Chandler, is that like this wasn't my first startup. This was the one where I was like, I'm going to do it this time. Like this time I'm going to do all the things, and like I just like stacked the deck, right?
Yeah.
And it wasn't a single effort. It was a few of us, but the point is that we had all of the things, to your point, and I still couldn't get it to work, right? And eventually you sort of get in this point where, as a startup, if you have to raise capital, you really are giving away the most valuable thing you have, which is equity, in exchange for a little bit of money. And once you get to the point where you haven't created enough financial return, okay, and a sizable enough piece of the equity has been given away already or sold already, okay, the startups tend to get into this thing where they can't raise any more capital because the entrepreneurs themselves don't have enough equity to make it worth their time anymore, right? And so
Yeah.
someone's got to come in and fund the thing, right? And that's really where that kind of ended up, right? There was too many
Gotcha.
investors, too many mouths to feed, and too little traction, right? With the people that wanted to crush it. So the thing is that like along the way, really when I graduated from the Olin School of Business with my MBA, like in 2004, I was one of the only students that like didn't have a job coming out of school. And people were like, so like, what do you, because I was doing a startup, by the way, that was like so promising and it completely fell apart right at the end. So like anyone who goes to sort of like a ranked university, like knows that like there's always a couple of kids at the end that like don't have a job lined up. And I was that guy, right? Which makes it harder, right? So I was like, look, and this wasn't even the thing. It was more like, look, I know there's a way to sort of like acquire a small business. I just don't know how to do it, right? Like I need to find one. And, people are like, what, like, wow, you must have money. That's awesome. I'm like, I don't have any money. And they were like, what? I mean, I don't, what? And I was like, yeah, I think you find the business and then like you just go to the bank and you're like, hey, I found this business. They've been around for 20 years. Can I have a loan so I can acquire 100% of this company? And they do it because, there's infrastructure, there's collateral assets there. It's basically a leverage buyout, right? Yeah. And you've got a reputation in a business that's been there for a long time. And
it's eliminating risk on the bank side of things, right? Because that's ultimately all they care about is risk management.
It depends what you compare it to, right? So in other words, the reason startups have to go raise money is because they can't just walk into a bank and get it. And for anyone who's raised money knows it takes like 48 months. It's like 2 years of your life, which is a complete distraction, right? And guess what? You just gave away your company. Is what you did, right? And so when you buy a company, it's bankable, the funds are available, and I mean you have to come up with some cash, okay? You can't just like put in no money at all. I want to be very clear about that. There's a lot of like clickbait out there. It's an advanced tactic. I can even go into it if you want to, but the point is I don't want anyone leaving this podcast thinking like, oh, I'm just going to go buy a business and with zero skin in the game. That's not going to work well for you. But the point around acquisition entrepreneurship was I bought this company. The first company I ever bought was a book printing company. Okay. And I ran it for about 7 years. We were doing about 8 million in revenue. And, again, before I bought the company, I had started a business. After I'd started a business, like I was in, the entrepreneurs organization, and I was active in the accelerator program, and I was just in the entrepreneurial community. And what happened was I kept being introduced by entrepreneurs to other entrepreneurs as someone who buys and sells companies. And it was in this sort of way, just repeatedly, it was in this sort of way that was like, oh, okay, not so much like he's a finance bro, but more like I don't really respect him as an entrepreneur because like he's not really doing what we're doing. Right. Interesting. And for me, it was like, gosh, number one, entrepreneurs do not understand what I do because it's exactly what they're doing. Okay.
I cannot wait. Listen, I would have been early, like 3-4 years into running Lyles Barbecue. I would have met you and said the exact same thing. And I will go on the record and say I would have been so wrong for having said it because, we'll get into it, but like you were right. And it's so please continue. But I would have 100% been on this guy's not a real entrepreneur.
Exactly. So, right. And so like number two, it's just kind of like the reason why I ended up writing Buy Then Build was kind of motivated by these sort of like, you're not one of us kind of things. And I wanted people to understand that, we are, but more importantly, the thing is that like, I graduated college and went through grad school, between 99 and 2004. Okay. This was a critical time, a pivotal time of my career. And, in my 20s, like trying to figure out what am I doing? How can I start a business? Do I go corporate? Do I whatever? And it was really during that time that I realized that just by buying an existing company, I was able to completely reverse engineer the startup equation and end up with all the capital, all the stock, right? So it's one of these where we've all seen the movie Moneyball, okay? And if you've seen that movie, if you haven't seen that movie and you're an entrepreneur, stop listening to this podcast and go see it, okay? It's just like Brad Pitt driving around in a truck, frustrated because like he can't get his team to do what he wants, and the world hates him, and like one man learns what it means to be a hero and like change the sport forever.
And he's
like
just constantly snapping and pointing at Jonah Hill. Like
yeah,
that's just, give me the stats.
Gets on base. Gets on. Why do we like him? He gets
Love
on
that
base.
Scene.
And here's the point: when you acquire an existing business, okay, you are getting on base first. Okay, that's the whole thing. You've got revenue. You've got hopefully profitable revenue, or else you're not buying the company without some, very discerning, terms. But like you've got profit, you've got revenue, you've got infrastructure, you've got staff. Usually there's some kind of standard operating procedures. And the big thing is you've got product market fit, right? Mm-hmm. So all of the things that we're trying to do as an entrepreneur are already in place, okay? And the thing is that because you can go to the bank and get a loan for, up to 90% of the acquisition, okay? You bring those real estate investor economics to the startup world, to the business world, right? So what I wanted to do was teach these entrepreneurs, like, look, I know you're working so hard to build this, and if you make it, great, but there's maybe a different way you should think about it. And Chandler, most of the time that I'm coaching an entrepreneur and they're like, well, wait, how would I think about this? I say, well, okay, what's your business idea? Okay. Sometimes they say, I want to create this thing that doesn't exist and it connects the whole world in this whole new unique way and sends them to outer space. And I'm like, that's incredible. That's a startup. Like you need infrastructure that doesn't exist. Okay.
And then you meet the guy that's like, I'm going to revolutionize the barbecue industry. And you should have been like, well,
yeah, like anyone who's familiar with Peter Thiel knows, like it's 0 to 1 or it's N+1. And the thing is it's like every couple of years I'll see someone in St. Louis start an SEO company, right? I love SEO. I'm very passionate about it. I understand why people kind of hang a shingle and get after it, right? I get it. But the point is they don't have to start because there's already 12 of them here. So like, why don't you just go around and buy them all up, right? And then you can the infrastructure is there and you can change it moving forward. So anything that's N+1, even if you have a certain je ne sais quoi or a certain frame that you want to bring to it, right? The thing is it's usually cheaper to acquire the infrastructure that already exists rather than, create it from thin air.
Yeah, because it's used at that point, which is funny. Like even if it's a SEO company, your office furniture is still technically used, so you're still going to get a little bit of a better deal on it. I do have a question though. The N+1 thing. So I've obviously heard of Peter Thiel's book 0 to 1, but it's not back here. Believe it or not, I've never actually read it. I would love. Yeah. Can you unpack what he means by 0 to 1 and N+1? Because I actually have never heard that.
But yeah,
I've heard the 0 to 1 part, but not the N+1.
So Peter Thiel was the co-founder of PayPal, right, and many other things. But that's what he's sort of infamous for. Was he the first investor in Facebook, kind of a thing? But whatever. So
yeah, he was early in there. Yeah.
Yeah, the thing with 0 to 1 is the sort of I'm creating something that doesn't exist. Okay, and N+1 is simply like my company is basically inventing an incrementally better mousetrap.
Yeah, gotcha. Yeah, it's hard to gain market share when you're just creating the mousetrap that's slightly better, because everybody's gonna look at you and be like, well, I've already got this legacy product in place, so you want me to change everything I do in my life to do your marginally better thing, which your salespeople are probably doing an okay job of explaining to me anyways. It's a much tougher road to hoe for sure versus like we've completely created a whole new space and try it out. So that makes a lot of sense. Okay, I get it. But I do like the idea of even if you're going to start an SEO company, or in my case, like perfect example. I've talked about it on the podcast before. I used to own a barbecue restaurant. You and I had talked about it a little bit, but I started that thing by literally getting in a fight with my wife. You'll love this story. So I got in a fight with my wife while I was in the Air Force because we had just got married, and I was yeah, right. This is destined for greatness. So we start this, we get in a fight because I had a backyard hobby that was barbecuing. And then she looked at our bank account that we combined and she said, you can't spend this much money every weekend on a hobby that I don't really eat and enjoy, and it's like killing me. And so we had one of those early marriage discussions, as I'm sure you're well aware of. And I basically ended the argument with, if I can sell enough to break even, you have to leave me alone. And then that's how the company was started. So literally I went to the office and I was walking around like a weird, barbecue drug dealer with a coat and, opening it up saying like, do you want one of these? And I was giving away samples and I sold enough to break even. And it's the only time I've probably been right in 10 plus years of marriage with her. And I like to bring it up every once in a while. But from there, I didn't ever want to be an entrepreneur. I didn't really know. I didn't really know it was an option. I didn't grow up with entrepreneurs or anything like that, but I got the bug. And then I was like, all right, well, the next thing you do is you sell more of it. And then, we cash flowed everything and bootstrapped everything and literally started with $5,000 and a tent on the side of the road and then found a rehab place. But we grinded for unnecessarily difficult amount of time. Like it was 3 or 4 years before we finally sort of figured everything out, which I'm sure that time frame makes sense to you when you talk to people that are small business owners, because 5 years and $1 million tends to be the like tipping point for a small business I've seen that sort of succeeds and goes forward long term. But what ultimately happened for us was that we found another barbecue restaurant in Lexington, Kentucky. They wanted to retire. So we basically just bought them out of their lease, which was like, I think we bought the whole restaurant for $20,000 and then we put another like 80 into it. Okay. And so you're talking about for $100,000, we bought a location that was already built, ready to go. People were already used to eating barbecue there, same price point, already proved all the things. So when I read Buy Then Build 6 months ago, I did one of those things where you just put your head down on the desk and you just go like, oh, this is what I was missing. This makes way more sense because, and the reason I want to park here for a second is because the unhealthy ego of some entrepreneurs, because you have to have a certain level of like ego, I think, to want to be an entrepreneur and like, I can go do this better than it's ever been done, or I can launch something new. And that's okay. I think it's a good thing, but we also have to be aware of that sort of, dragon in our closet, right? We can't let it run us, but you will say, the Moneyball example is great because it's like, hey, you just hit a single or you just walked and got on base. I played baseball in high school. Like that is like, nobody's proud of walking. Like that's not like you talk about, I hit a home run. Like that's the thing. Like, when Brad Pitt's pointing at Jonah Hill and he's like, he just got on base, which means we're going to win. And that's what I had to learn, at least, was I don't really care about the story that I'm going to be able to tell everybody, which is 100% ego driven. I just want to be in the sport of business and play it as well as possible. And I think if you do what you're talking about, which is like, I've seen you say, try to find companies that are establishing that 5-year mark, maybe $1 million in revenue or something. And then that's a much better way to get into the game. And I just want to say thanks for writing the book because it was helpful for me, because what we ended up doing was a year ago, I met my partner, we started High Beam Marketing, and then I realized most businesses just suck at growing sales. So our long-term game plan is you have the central hub of the marketing agency, and then we're going to go buy businesses and just connect them and then grow their sales and then run. So, I'm a Walker believer. Thank you. This is great.
Thanks, Chandler. I mean, I guess, what I would add to that is that, you talk to entrepreneurs and we all kind of know that, there's this axiom, but like, that 1 out of 10 startups kind of make it, right? When you talk to entrepreneurs, I think that in my experience, most of them say like, yeah, that's high, right? Like it's less than 1 out of 10, but it's sort of like, okay.
Yeah.
But we all sort of know that it's like high risk. What isn't discussed is what it looks like when you actually make it. Okay. And 96% of all companies in the United States never exceed $1 million in annual revenue, ever. So the point here is that, like, when I was getting my MBA, like, you would ignore these companies that are like $1 million in revenue. You're like, that's so small. I can't even like analyze it or whatever, because it's small, hashtag SMB, right? But it's one of these where, sorry, I got some light here, but so it's one of these where they, as soon as I figured that out, I kind of realized like, oh my God, like $1 million in revenue is so small for being so
when you're doing MBA case studies on multi-billion-dollar companies that spend $1 million on a Monday. Yeah.
Well, I mean, even if it's like 50 million, it's like, yeah, that's a business. You know what I mean? But like $1 million, like what is that? But like, I just want to say, like, my second year of B school, I was walking up and down Wydown Boulevard here in St. Louis, right? And it's like it's probably the most expensive neighborhood in St. Louis. Okay, and it's like the big boulevard, and like there are these big grand houses like up and down. And I was looking at them, and I remember thinking to myself, who lives in these homes? No one here is from Silicon Valley. Like there's no like, sexy startup in St. Louis that's like living in here, right? Like, and then I realized like these guys, like these people must own like 6 subways, or like, like one, like, I don't know this, but I was hanging around the Olin School of Business after I graduated, and I would go to these executive things, and because you'd sort of meet other alumni. And one of the guys that I sat next to at this one event, you could just see he was so content with the world. He was so content. And I was just like, what do you do? And he was like, oh, I own a like a manufacturing company. And I sort of looked at him, and he was very nicely dressed for someone who owned a manufacturing company. And I mean, like, I don't mean like he was wearing like a black tie. I just mean like, maybe it was just a sport coat, but like it stood out as being like slightly fashion forward and like ultra expensive, And I was like, well, what do you manufacture? And he said, well, do you know those can lights? And he pointed to some in the room. I said, yeah. And he said, we make that piece of aluminum or whatever that is the outside of the can light. And I was like, oh
my gosh.
And I said, how many companies in the United States do that? And he goes, 2.
I have about 20 can lights in this house right now, so I can only imagine.
Yeah, exactly. And there was a guy in St. Louis that did like street signs, like all the street signs for like the state of Missouri. And I was like, what? And then there was a guy that like Listerine was invented here. Like I think the fuse was invented here. Like just really sort of unsexy, boring items that are like in our everyday life, right? That like cash flow, but like don't get magazine covers. And then sorry, one more thing. In contrast to the sort of like $1 million kind of entrepreneur, you have to look at what is it that is sort of like swaying the way we're thinking? What is it that is creating this kind of North Star of like innovation and like like creating 0 to 1? And it's great. I love the effort, right? But the thing is we're looking at entrepreneurs on our magazine covers that are not the 1%, right? This is the 0.01% type of entrepreneur that makes that magazine cover. So, when we're all out there trying to be Steve Jobs, don't be Elon Musk. Elon Musk acquired PayPal. Elon Musk acquired Tesla. Yeah, and now I guess he acquired Twitter. But like the thing is no one was paying attention to the fact that he actually got sued for calling himself a co-founder of Tesla. He did not start it,
Yeah.
So.
No, I'm really glad you pointed that out, because I remember a very vivid conversation. I was in the Chow Hall on the Air Force Base in D.C., and I looked at my buddy and I said, I think I can open like 1,000 barbecue restaurants. Because I had just been reading about Mark Zuckerberg and, Evan Spiegel at Snapchat and all these other like my age-ish founders of these massive tech companies. And what I never realized was that the one of the reasons I really liked the idea of owning my own business was creative freedom and financial freedom.
Yeah.
I'm here to tell you, I only needed like 4 barbecue restaurants in Lexington to hit that mark and be well past it and be one of those guys you mentioned in the St. Louis chambers and the business school networking stuff, right? It's you don't need to be on the cover of Forbes. Like that's nice to have, but it's not why you should want to start a business for sure. And I definitely suffered from that disease. We ended up getting on a TV show called The Prophet on CNBC. I don't know if you know what that is, but it was.
Oh yeah, of course I do.
It's
Marcus
basically
Lemonis?
Yeah. So we ended up getting on that show, which was like at the time I remember thinking, I'm like, this is it. This is like why, like this is one of the reasons I started the business. This is great. And then through that whole process, I realized like, oh, we're still just running the business. Like this is still just business day to day. Like there's like the cameras leave and then stuff still has to happen. So there's no amount of success from a media coverage standpoint that will ever help you break away from the day-to-day grind or monotony of running a business / leading people, product market fit, all those things never go away just because you hit this media milestone. So
did Marcus try to buy a percentage of your company?
No. So we ended up with we were going to launch a new barbecue sauce line with my mom. We branded her as Mama Lyles. And then, I ended up through the course of the show, I got hired to go work with Marcus on his food brand for 6 months or something. So
awesome.
It was a great experience. I had fun. TV is fun. Like I will say, like that was a fun time, but it didn't change the way we did our business. Like I still had my dishwasher call out sick on Saturday night the following weekend after it aired. And so I was still in the middle of the day-to-day running of it. You know, it's wild. So
yeah.
So we've spent the first, 20 minutes here. We got that entrepreneur believing in, all right, I'm going to go do an acquisition. I'm going to explore acquisition entrepreneurship versus a startup, especially because I'm not creating the next Facebook or whatever. So like, what are some of the things you advise people to look for when they're acquiring their first deal or they're starting to source some of their first deals? Do I need to be experienced in that industry? Do I need to, is it financing that's most important? Like, how do you approach that first, like 4 or 5 deals that you're looking at?
Yeah. So, I think since we're kind of anchoring in comparison to startups, let's start there. Okay. Anyone who's ever tried to raise money knows that it's only partially due to the idea or the branding or whatever. Okay. And what people invest in are the entrepreneur or the people behind it. Right. And what does that mean? Well, it means that if you happen to have a startup that, sort of accelerates usage of Microsoft SharePoint, it'd be really nice if you had an executive from Microsoft on your team leading it as CEO, right? So you got to like match those kind of things up. Like, so a lot of career experience are the little things that make the big difference when it comes to selling investors on your equity, right? When you are going out to buy a business, look, when I first started writing Buy Then Build, it took me 4.5 years to write this book, Chandler. Okay. And the thing is like,
I didn't realize that. Wow.
I mean, just to be clear, I spent 10 years. I got the idea for the book in 2004 because there's no book there. I was like, this is so like, it's opaque, it's fragmented. Like everyone's valuations seem to be all over the place. Like I can't tell if it's in acquiring these small businesses, if you're familiar with the terms, felt even a little bit like a pig in a poke. Do you know what that is? The British term? Like you just don't know what you got in the bag that you bought, so it's like, there was just so much of that. And it was like, why is there nowhere to go? Like, what's the resource? Right. And so, but I was like, well, I can't write the book. I haven't done it yet. And so I bought a company. I ran it for 7 years. I ended up exiting to an acquisition target, someone who I was trying to acquire, did another startup, failed. Right. And then I ended up buying another 6 companies over that next, 3 years or whatever, right? And I'm looking at one now. I might buy one now, but we'll see. But so the point is that, and then I spend multiples of my net worth, tens of millions of dollars acquiring businesses. Okay, a decade plus of my life living it, figuring it out. And then spent 4.5 years writing the book. Okay, I wrote it, by the way, 6 times from scratch. Okay, finally, I feel like I got it right. Okay, anyway.
And I should have put it on my desk, but it's not a thin book. This is not like 100 pages, and it's not 15, 16, 20-point font. It's like, it's dense. Yeah. It's got a lot of info. Yeah.
I mean, thank you.
And dense in a good way. That's a bad word. I'm a marketer, brander, but it's like, yeah,
I really set out to write the single best book on, acquisition entrepreneurship that could ever be written. I hit Wall Street Journal bestseller actually just a few weeks ago, USA Today bestseller a few weeks ago.
I saw that. That's great.
Yeah. And the book's been an Amazon bestseller for 4 years. And all of a sudden it was kind of a nice shot in the arm, right? But here, look, I don't mean to be praising myself. The point is I started by saying, how can I approach this like in a way that Jim Collins would, right? Like, I'm just going to go interview a whole bunch of people and try to like discern best practices and like whatever. And the problem, Chandler, was that everyone I talked to was so different, right? It was like, oh yeah, well this happened and then that happened, or like I just found it because I was working with this broker, or I found it because like my buddy knew a guy, or whatever it was. And then it was like, okay, so what are all the ways? And then what makes it strong or weak or whatever? And then I started to realize, okay, I can't find best practices because there isn't this massive amount of statistically significant stuff in this like very nuanced labyrinth of a space. Okay. So instead of approaching it that way, what I'll do is I'll come up with concept vehicles, right? I'll come up with ways to help people frame what it is they're looking at, right? So in the book, I think it's in chapter 3, maybe, there's like an AE matrix. And it's just the 4 quadrants of like, when I'm looking at a business to buy, Is it a value play or is it a growth play? Right. And so it's sort of like I had that on my whiteboard for over a year trying to figure out what the hell the right quadrants were. Now you read it in 5 seconds, you're like, oh yeah, it's so duh.
Yep.
You know, it's almost like, why didn't I draw that? But the point is like, so I just tried to come up with these frameworks, and
you could have just asked that new fancy AI chat GPT. It probably would have just like spit something out in 5 seconds.
Yeah. So I'm sorry. I'm trying to remember what the question was, Chandler.
Yeah, no, it's just like, well, you ended up, so you have the quadrant is how you're framing those initial deals. And that's sort of the advice you give.
Yeah. What were people doing wrong? Right. So then I started saying, what is everyone doing wrong? And I realized that really myself, when I was talking with brokers, the line of questions they would all ask me. Okay. The great ones and the terrible ones would all sort of like ask me the same sort of set of questions. And so that wasn't what was differentiating them, right? But then I started thinking about like, well, why is this whole thing wrong? In other words, if you went somewhere and said, listen, I used to work in the barbecue space, immediately in their head, they're like, okay, Chandler's looking for a barbecue, right? And then I'd be like, are you looking for a restaurant or like a product or like, you know, what's the deal? And it's like, that has nothing to do with it, right? Like the way that you need to identify if something is a right fit for you in this space is you need to first understand what it is that you bring to the table as the entrepreneur. Going back to the analogy of like, is the investor going to believe in you because you bring something to the table? Okay, so what do you do best, and how is the company going to benefit with you as the owner and CEO? Okay, if you understand that, you're already halfway to goal. I'm not kidding. 9 out of 10 people that start looking for a business to acquire never find one. 75% of people who raise funds to run a 2-year search never close on a business.
Really?
Yes.
Why? Is it just
because they go at it the wrong way? They go at it the wrong way, right? Now, okay. There's one other thing I want to say there. If you raise funds to run a search, okay, it's technically called it's a search fund, right? It's a traditional search fund. What happens is that all of those investors, in theory, are investing in what it is that you buy, okay? And search fund investors are very specific with the types of businesses they want, okay? And if you called them and said, listen, I want a barbecue, I want this barbecue restaurant, that's probably not going to fit in their little model, right? And the thing is like Chandler, if I give you, let's just say you're like, hey, I want to go search for a business for a couple of years, Walker, and you'll be my investor, and when I find it, you're gonna invest in my company. I'll give you a little extra equity, blah blah blah, and then you can be on my board. Okay, I'd be like, I love it. And then I say, you know, where do you live? And you're like, I live in this expensive, you know, place in Boston, and I just graduated from my Ivy League school, so like I need a lot of money. I'd be like, that's cool. I'll give you $100,000 a year. Chandler, here's $200,000. I just bought 2 years of your life. Okay, that's what I just bought. Okay, make no mistake. That's what you just sold. Okay,
it's a lot of time.
I want you to bring me the business that I want you to get a return on, right? And so when you go out and do it yourself, okay, you create immense freedom in terms of the scope of what you're able to bring. So when you look at the AE matrix, you've got eternally profitable in that lower left-hand corner. That's what search fund investors are looking for. They want something that's like, you know, like salt trucks and snow shovel and, you know, corporate window washing and just like, you know, business, you know, services with like low capital intensiveness and,
not really market dependent.
Preferably B2B, preferably fragmented, like just no technological threats coming in or replacements coming in. And lately, the last like 18 to 24 months, there's been a slight emphasis on something that can be tech enabled, right? Because now they're starting to say like, okay, what is the growth opportunity, right?
Yeah.
So really, the answer to the question is looking at yourself and understanding what you bring to the table.
Yeah. Well, that's a good point to segue to the next question I had, which was, are the best acquirers working in the business day to day, or are they primarily just sitting in that sort of like board member seat and then they put a good CEO or manager in place depending on the size of the business? Like which one tends to work out better?
Yeah. Look, if I were wanting to promote this concept and have a lot of people make bad decisions that are not going to be good for them, I would give the sexy answer, which is buy a business and don't even go to work, man. Put a manager in there, you're good.
Mm-hmm.
Don't do that.
Yeah.
Don't do that. Here. Okay, so here's the thing. Like, even 2 weeks ago, I was I even started teaching entrepreneurship through acquisition at my alma mater at Olin, and I quit because I was running the acquisition lab, and like it was sort of like it didn't. At the acquisition lab, we've just helped over 300 entrepreneurs close on over 100 million in business transactions. Sorry, our group is now 350 strong. Yeah, so we're having like great success over there. But I went to go speak at Olin recently again, and I'm talking to all these MBA students, and I'm talking about like, look, I know you guys all want to start up, but like you got to at least understand that this is here. Check it out. And one of the students raised her hand and said, like, okay, but like, how do I do what you're doing? Like, how do I own like all these companies? Like, so I buy one, exactly your question. Do I buy one and then like I put a manager in and then I go buy another one? And I was like, no. And then the professor laughed. The professor, by the way, has, started a company, grew it for, I think, 7 years and sold it for 30 million. Okay. And now he's working as an independent sponsor, raising capital, buying companies, da, da, da. And he laughed and he goes, everyone is trying to fast forward to be me and Walker, and like you can't. And I couldn't have said it any better. If you buy
20 years later.
Yeah, if you buy, I'm 46 years old. Like I've been doing this for almost 20 years, right? I guess I literally wrote the book on it. Like, it's one of these things. Like, right?
It took you 4 years to write the book on it alone.
And, totally.
Not counting the experience.
It's one of these where when you buy a company, especially if you are using like an SBA loan, right, which has a personal guarantee on it, okay?
Yep.
Do not put someone else in place on your personal guarantee and walk away. So a couple things are going to happen. Number one, when the going gets hard, that person's leaving. Number two, you have no idea how to operate the business. Number three, if things are good, you have no idea how to operate the business, so they've got you over a barrel. And guess what happens? Your expenses start going up. Where's all the risk? It's now on the owner of the business, because whoever is operating it is the one with all the power, right, and all the control. And I'm not saying it's even, it doesn't even have to be malicious intent. It's just sort of like, look at the incentives. Like my incentive is to operate the business and just make sure that like you don't go bankrupt this month. And if I do good, then I should get some cash, right?
Yeah. Well, it's what you said it perfectly. It is a non-sexy answer, but it is an honest answer. And I was curious about which way it would go, because I was going to argue with you if you put it out the other way. But I just know from the barbecue restaurant, the days like we would take 2 weeks off and early on, and we'd have great managers in, but I'd come back and just after 2 weeks of being gone, I would see slippage all around me. So
totally.
We were just at that $1 million revenue mark, and we had like 25 people that were employed with us. And it was just getting to the point where we could leave for 2 weeks at a time. And, I've seen, the internet's great, but you see so many gurus out there, right, that are putting out content and they're like, hey, build your business in a system so you can leave for a month. And it's like, you should not do this if you want to leave for a month. You should just do something else. Like, I don't know, like go work in sales for 5 years and crush it. And then,
take a month off,
go retire because you invested in the S&P or something. But I don't disagree. This is not for people that don't want to work.
Yeah. So I frequently call it the most engaged life possible, right? Like when you are an owner and you're an operator or you're an entrepreneur, however you want to splice this up. Let me say a successful entrepreneur, okay? Like someone who's actually hit sustainability in their business. The thing is that you like life is never the same ever again, okay? Because you start to realize like, wow, there's no other analogy better than the Matrix. Like it's like you just break out of the Matrix. It's like I don't need a job. Like I can create, work and revenue and money, right? Like different levels, but it's sort of like you can create all of that, like just by getting out there and hustling and doing deals and creating things out, just add value, right? And if you're in the service of others, like the money will come. And the thing is like if you are a business owner, that business breathes when you breathe. It runs when you run, right? Like it's just, you cannot separate that ownership. And so the thing is that when business is bad, your soul is bad, right? And when business is good, your soul is good. And The opposite is also true. You direct your business, right? It is, there's, all I can say is that when you own a company, it's like you, especially if you buy it, okay, you are the star of your own movie, okay? And like the downside is really bad, but the upside is really amazing. And everyone just wants to know, are you going to save the world, or are you going to let it, the aliens destroy it, right? And so like if I'm sitting here watching your movie, Chandler, and I'm wondering like, I just want Chandler to save the world, and you're like, dude, like, I just want to bounce and like run my company from like the beach with my laptop. It's like, first of all, if you're going to the beach with your laptop, stop. Just go to the beach.
Well, I think it goes back to intentionality. It's like, why would you, like, if that's what you want, I'm happy for you and I want you to want that, but don't also want to run a business. They're two different lives.
Two different
like,
things,
they're just
man.
two different. Yeah, it's like you can be very happy. There's this old analogy is making the rounds on the internet nowadays, and I don't know if you have seen this, but it's the fisherman analogy, where he's like fishing and he's stopping at 5 to go hang out with his family after he catches a certain amount of fish, and everybody's like, somebody comes along and says, hey, you should start a business catching fish and then work for 20 years so you can retire to sit on the beach with your family and eat fish. And it's like he's already got what he wants right now, but at least he's self-aware. And I do think I think we're coming out of a 10-year run where a lot of people have gotten into the business space that didn't necessarily ultimately want that. They were looking for something else, or maybe they were sold a dream that, wasn't real. And it's sad because it is expensive, and it's it's fine. Like, personal guarantees are real. And, when the rent is due, it is the house that they come after. So
in the acquisition lab, so with the acquisition lab, I really just like, I had all these people, right? I mean, I think I've sold 70,000 copies so far. And, people call me all the time and they're like, hey, can I just meet with you? And like, I want to talk about buying a business. And I'm like, if I just met with everybody, like, I wouldn't be able to do anything, So I started the acquisition lab just to do that. It was like, okay, let's engineer, like, what would a world-class program look like to help people sort of, get to this goal? And then how do we make it very affordable and all these other things, right? And so the thing is that I put everyone through this intensive before they're able to run with the other group. Okay, I want everyone up to speed on all of our stuff, right? And at the very end, after they've sort of like, obviously it's also vetted, so you have to apply, and like there's all this stuff. And then once you get in and then you go through the intensive, then I have an Ask Me Anything session. I've never seen this publicly. During that talk, I always have what I call the Mr. Miyagi talk, where I'm like, you can't do this. Like, just paint the fence. Like, let me tell you how, can I cuss on this show?
Yeah, go for it.
Let me tell you how fucking bad it is to be a business owner, right? And you just lean in. And I'm like, let me explain when I almost went bankrupt. Let me explain when 40% of my workforce walked out in one day. 2 different events, right? It's just like, it's really terrible. But
well, it's what's funny, like, it's the same story for us. No, it is. It's like, if you can't help but do it, if you're the type of person that can help but do it, you'll know. And how I know that I'm in the game is, like, we ultimately tried a new concept with the restaurant. It was not a barbecue restaurant. It was called Nash's. It was a 250 seat restaurant, 5,000 square feet. It was huge. It was basically like being really good at basketball and then also thinking you could be really good at baseball. And it was a totally different thing. And we started it up from scratch. We didn't buy an operating business that was already running. So I still hadn't learned the lesson. And, I'm glad we're friends now, so that I can just, anytime I get this itch from now on, I'm calling you first. And I'm just like, hey, I need you to talk me off this ledge because I'm about to really do something stupid. But ultimately, we went from 20 employees to 70 employees in 30 days and launched this. It was a crazy story. And it resulted in catastrophe. It was financial catastrophe. It took us completely out of the game and ended up starting a chain of dominoes that killed the barbecue restaurant. We had spent 6 years and hundreds of thousands of hours grinding and building, and it was just gone. And it was gone in 90 days. And it took me about 2 years to sort of like reset and calm down and look at what happened. I had to figure out what went wrong and grow myself. But now, a year later, or a year ago, I got back into the game, and I just can't help myself. And my wife looked at me the other day because she's not wired like this, and she said, "Why? Like, why would you do this?" And I'm like, I wish I couldn't. I wish I didn't have to. Like, I really wish that. I promise, but I I can't help it but not. And I think if you're wired that way and you're interested in acquisition entrepreneurship, definitely check out what Walker's got going on over at the Acquisition Lab. It's a really cool program. I mean, if you're curious and you're not ready to commit the money, I mean, the book is amazing too. So,
It is.
but I believe in community. So I think getting involved in the lab is a really good idea for somebody who wants to explore this. So,
I mean,
man, I
Chandler,
appreciate you coming on the show. This is great.
Look, I know the book is $17. Let me even take it lower. There's tons of free resources on buythenbuild.com. Like just,
Yep.
it's all, and go listen to Chandler's podcast and rock it.
No, man, this is great. We'll make sure to link it up. Is there anything else you want to go over before I let you go, man?
No, I'm great, Chandler. Thank you. It's your show, bro.
This was awesome, man. I appreciate you so much, Walker. We appreciate everybody that was listening this week. We will see you next time. Peace.